Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to get into charm casting. I'm really excited. We haven't done a psychic tool exercise in a while. So if you are interested wanting to incorporate charm casting into your readings, I'm going to break it all down for you, how to use them, how to read with them. And if you're new here, welcome. My name is Lauren here on my channel. I like to teach people how to strengthen their psychic skills. So I like to mostly talk about, your clairs and how to do that outside of tools. But I do understand that tools are just a fun part of, doing these readings. And so I do like to cover them, and also teach you how to read them intuitively as well. And charms are definitely something that you can read intuitively or just very literally. And we're going to cover both. So when you're done, make sure to check out my playlist of all the different types of tools that are out there. So charms. Charms are basically symbols. They're representations that hold meaning, that hold value. So when we think about a little charm, it has a representation of something else. It's an icon. It's an amulet. It's a talisman. It represents something. It has a meaning. So like obviously when we think about symbols, like we think of heart, a lot of people might associate that with love. And a lock might be secrecy. And essentially what we're doing is we're setting the intention that we are going to use these charms to divine meaning, to divine messages from those charms. We set the intention, who are we talking to, who are we asking these messages from, and we're saying, hey, communicate to us through these charms. Honestly, it's no different than tarot, than Lenormand, than a Ouija board. Same exact structure, same exact approach. And like I say with all my tool videos, the important thing is to not let it become a crutch. You always want to rely on your intuition first. So if you're new to your psychic skills, I always recommend learning your clairs first, but I understand that you just want to jump into it. But I would always recommend watching the video that I have about incorporating tools in a very like moderate way. So charms are really cool because they kind of come from the same origins of like bone casting or rune casting. And basically casting is like throwing, and back in the olden days we used to throw bones, we used to throw runes with markings on it to get messages from the gods or from a higher power to divine meaning about the weather, about the crops, about whatever it is that people had questions about. Like literally coins, you flip a coin, yes or no. Like we literally do this today. Bone throwing or osteomancy, that was practiced in a lot of African cultures back in the day. And apparently that's, when I was doing research, apparently that's almost like 2,000 to 3,000 years old, they think. In Northern Europe, they found runes that people carved into from the Norse and Germanic tribes that they think came all the way back from the 2nd century. So this stuff is old. They've been divining meaning from throwing stones, throwing runes, bones, for a very long time. It's a very old divination technique. And charms is kind of like the new modern version of this. You see a bunch of people with pick a card videos, and I won't say it's like modern as if like it hasn't been around for a long time, but I found like a resurgence with it lately. It's very popular. Because I've seen it a lot around YouTube, of course. Apparently in ancient Rome, Greece, and Mesopotamia, and Egypt, it was called sortilege, and it was called casting of lots. And that's where they marked tokens or shells, and they were drawn or tossed to basically seek guidance. So this has been around for a long time. It's kind of cool. And you might also find the Magpie Oracle, which is actually just a very, very modern, it's only a couple of years old. And that is basically kind of like charms that relate to Lenormand. So they're basically tokens that represent each Lenormand card. So that's kind of confusing. When I researched it, I thought that maybe it was the same thing, but it's not. Magpie Oracle is very different than charms. Well, but it's the same in that they are little charms, but they represent Lenormand cards. So don't go and get Magpie Oracle if you don't know what Lenormand is. But if you do know where Lenormand is, you can absolutely like throw it into your charms, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, the first thing you want to do with charm casting, get some charms. Now you can definitely go out and buy some charms. I found that Etsy kind of had the best ones because there's people that were super creative. You can support, independent sellers, and they had a lot of like cool, unique items. Like if you go on Amazon, like they're boring and they're bleh. I don't know. You can go wherever you want, but there's cooler ones on Etsy. Now, I didn't have a kit myself, and I wanted to get one to make this video, so I got this from Moon Frost Emporium, and if you want this exact same one, I will link it down below. And the point here is you want to get a good variety of different symbols that might represent different meanings. So like, you know, a lightning bolt might represent ideas. The moon might represent intuition. The star might mean luck. This kit is kind of like a random selection. And so just intuitively looking at this, like this is a little goddess statue. And so I could just automatically say, hey, that represents female. If I pull that gold bar, you know, that could represent money, finances, if it gets pulled up. Here's two things that could be similar. We could say that this pentagram is protection, and then maybe this one is more the symbol of the maiden, the mother, the crone. Love this. Scarecrow. What would you guys use that for? Leave it down in the comments. I have no idea what I'll use that for, and so that's where I can, you know, ask spirit to give me a meaning for it, or I can assign a meaning to it. I would encourage you to buy a kit, but then slowly add to it. You can also just start from the ground up, but I would argue that might take you a little bit more time. But I am buying this kit, and the plan is to kind of add and subtract to it, to basically like make my own energy around this kit and personalize it to have its own energy and its own meaning. So like if you love D&D, you could throw in like one of your favorite D&D dice and maybe set a representation of what that means for you. You could even throw in your own astrological signs, so you could create those yourself. You could even throw in like stones to represent like birth months, you know, birthstones. And if you're out and about searching while you're on a trip or you're at a store, look for things that hold meaning for you. It could be old game pieces, it could be jewelry, family heirloom. I've got this seashell that I've had for a while. I'm going to throw that in there. In a way, you're creating your own symbolism, your own dictionary, your own language for your kit. And basically, when you use this, you're going to really understand, okay, every time I see this charm, it's going to mean this. And it's going to be very unique to you, which is super cool. So just know that even if I'm pulling a charm and it means one thing to me, it might mean something totally different to you. Or it could mean the same exact thing. If we both want to decide that heart means love, awesome, that's totally fine. But I think this is a great exercise in kind of developing that language with spirit, and just figuring out how they are going to communicate with you. And if you're really crafty, I would actually check out this video I found from this creator. Her name's Jessie. She made like tiles. That way she could make anything under the sun. She could print out little things of anything she wants, so that if she couldn't find something, she could basically make it. So that might be something to add as well to your kit. The point here with these charms is they need to be small, and they need to be kind of uniform in size-ish, and they all need to be able to fit kind of like in a bag or in a bowl together. Now, when it comes to actually reading charms, it's the very same thing that we would do with any other reading, even like reading runes. We want to go through the same order that we would do with any reading. So that means we are setting our boundaries, we are setting our protection, we are making sure that we are being very clear about who we are talking to, who are we getting these messages from. I kind of go over the order of all of this in my courses. So once you've done that, you're safe, you're grounded, you're protected, you've made sure you're talking to somebody that's, you know, not like a negative source. You're going to ask your question, and what you want to do is you want to put your hand into the charms, into your bowl, into your bag, focusing on that question. You're going to play with those charms. You're not really looking at them. What you want to do is you want to wait till the time feels right. You want to grab the amount that feels right, and then you're going to pull them out and drop them in front of you, and you're going to read them in relation to your question. So intuitively, you know, I'm just going to kind of read this as like the key to putting something together, because when I think of clothespin, I think of like holding something together, like you need a clothespin to hold something that needs to be like held together. So the key to holding something together is actually in the representation of the maiden, the mother, the crone? And maybe I could even ask a follow-up question of like, what is this? What are we talking about? Water. You know, this charm, the maiden, mother, crone, can also talk about like the cycle of life. So it's kind of saying, this is very philosophical. The key to holding together is kind of like ebbing and flowing and dealing with the ups and downs of it. So the key thing here is like, what other charms does it land next to? That's going to kind of inform the reading. If you want to just stick with maybe just doing one charm at a time to start, that's totally fine. And then you can kind of add as time goes on. But it's important to kind of pay attention to the meaning of, you know, hey, if we pull out a couple of these, what's the overarching story between all of these? Also, is the charm, is it flipped? Is it upside down? Again, you don't have to read it like that if you don't want to. You can set the intention ahead of time, like I'm not going to read it if it comes up upside down or anything. I'm not going to do reversals. Kind of like if you were to read tarot, like you don't have to read reversals. You can keep it nice and easy from the start, but I only mention it once you kind of like get going and you've been doing it for a while. You could add that to add more depth to your readings. So let's say if you pull the charm of the heart and you decide in the future that, okay, I am going to read it if it comes up upside down, then that is a more negative connotation, that we're lacking love or we're lacking compassion, versus if you pull it upright, there's a lot of love or there's a lot of compassion or something like that. From there, I would encourage you to play around with location, the place in which the charms fall. And you really could decide to go a million different ways with this, because like a lot of shamanic and witchcraft practitioners actually kind of like draw either literally or imaginary lines of like north, south, east, west. And if the charm falls in like north, south, east, west, it has a very different meaning. So I'll ask the question, what do we need to know about rune casting? North, east, south, west. Just kind of get these on camera here. A lot kind of in this south quadrant, maybe one in the east quadrant. In the east quadrant, I have the clear quartz, which to me always represents clarity. So, you know, casting charms is about clarity. And the east quadrant, again, communication. So it brings us clear communication. Now the south quadrant, and let's just say that we're going to read these upside down, right? And so the scarecrow, again, I'm reading this upside down, which to me says, you know, I decided that this one was fear. And in the south quadrant, this is all about like passion, and our willpower, vitality, energy. And so we have to kind of approach this with excitement and not fear, you know, when it comes to these charms. And then with this charm, the Hamsa, again, also in this south quadrant of kind of like, again, passion, energy, the way that we're approaching this, we have to make sure that we're protected and doing this the correct way, and doing it with good intentions. And then also the goddess in the south quadrant, which to me also is kind of a representation of the feminine and receiving, because our energy is one of receiving when it comes to these messages. Oh, I love this. And so in the west quadrant, you know, I kind of interpreted this as like a door knocker. And so the fact that this is in the west quadrant, which is often about intuition or emotions, dreams, you know, this to me says that charms are a way messages from the other side can literally come through. Like literally this is spirit coming to knock on the door and speak to us through these charms. That's kind of how I would interpret these charms, just using that quadrant-based system and my intuition and kind of the upright versus like flipped over meanings. Or you could do it on top of a tarot spread, which we often see. So if you're pulling it on top of the tarot, it's, you know, what cards is it falling on top of? You could set the intention, okay, if it falls on top of a certain card, it's in relation to that card. So I did past, present, future, just a normal kind of spread. In the past, you are not being present, you're not being very mindful, you're too focused on the past, on the future. Probably for each of you, this is going to look a little differently. And where you're at now is you're not paying attention to the signs, maybe, in whatever capacity that is. And so in the future, because of this, there's kind of a call to raise the ceiling, to be open more to the opportunities that are coming in. You're dreaming too small right now. You're dimming yourself because you're not living in the present and being open to the signs that Spirit is giving you. And so you're playing small, you're dimming yourself, you're not realizing how much more potential there is. So let's say we wanted to add charms to this to make the reading a little bit more complex. So these ones kind of fell all around this card is what I'm taking from this. And we've got, I immediately go to, okay, what are my keywords for this? We've got an idea, maiden, mother, crone, which is also about like cycles of life. And then spider, you know, sometimes I read spider as connection, about like the interconnectedness of things. So I would say that this is when we pay attention to the cycles and how everything connects, especially like when we get all these intuitive hits and signs from the universe and how everything starts to interconnect and how all these signs and cycles play out, then we're going to start to have these aha moments. So we can also pull a clarifying charm as well and say, I want to know more. Like, what is it that can be expanded on if we take this advice? Ooh. We're able to start new things. Maybe even like our passion gets ignited. And our cup gets filled, like we can hold more. Like this feels very self-care related. You know, maybe we can hold more, our cup gets filled, and we can start new projects and be more excited about things moving forward, which makes sense. That's why, you know, we could expand our future and expand our ceiling of what is possible. You could also get a casting mat. The kit that I bought also had a casting mat that came with it. You don't have to go out of your way to buy one. You can also just draw one on a piece of paper. So I'm just going to ask the question, what do I need to know about moving right now for myself, possibly moving? Ooh, okay, so I pulled the leaf on challenges, also the goddess. The goddess is kind of both touching challenges and money. So let's see. So the leaf I would interpret as weather. So there might be challenges with the weather when it comes to moving. That is something that I'm looking at when it comes to possibly moving. I'm looking at like possibly moving overseas, which is what I was mentally kind of thinking about. Now the goddess, I could interpret as female, so it could be a representation of me, but it also could be a representation of being of receiving. So I could be receiving challenges if I move. I also could, it could be that I'm receiving money, or I'm receiving money, but I'm also receiving challenges. And it's like overlapping the two. Money is knocking on the door though, so that's a good sign. I might have the money to do it. And then the dog came out, so there's a companion. What is this? Oh, on achievements. So there might be somebody like a friend or colleague, a partner that that comes about from me moving. Like my moving brings new friendships, new partnerships maybe. You know, the spoon, I was kind of like setting as a representation of like food or health or like the kitchen. And it just happened to land on health and kind of the heart. So maybe this is like that I would have to kind of pay attention to my health, my heart, and like what I put in my body with a move. And then with the spider, there's changes. There's changes to my connections. Like I always see the spider as like a spider's web and like how a bunch of things are connected. So it could be that it's like changing my network. Like it could be literal like friends and community is probably like how I would interpret that. And then water, or the representation of emotions is what I'm kind of like saying the seashell is. It also could be literally being by the ocean. It would be, you know, me changing to living by a more waterfront area, whereas I am currently living in like a literal desert. So maybe that would be a big change in some sort of way. I even saw one version where somebody drew out 2 circles where it had yes and a no, and then they kind of threw the charms out on it. And so then it was like, okay, if charms fall on yes, it's yes and here's why, or it's no and here's why. That one I would get a little like iffy with because you can kind of like influence where you're throwing it, but you can kind of like use it like a tarot spread. You could draw out like past, present, future. You could write out little questions and you don't even have to throw it. You can just place it into those different quadrants. You don't even have to draw out a piece of paper. You can just have questions and pull out charms for each question. So I'm just going to ask that same question again with a yes or a no. Should I move? Again, my head is turned every time I'm doing this. Not even looking at the paper. Oh my gosh. If that's not clear as day. I mean, you can see that off camera, but this one is even further south of it. So no, and this is like a chunk of black tourmaline. Black tourmaline is about getting rid of negative energy. So if we're reading this as is, okay, the answer is no, we don't want to move because maybe we're going to have a hard time getting rid of negative energy. Also no, because maybe there's not as much magic as we think there's going to be in this move. And then this crystal, let me just look it up. I can't remember what that crystal is, but I know what it is. Howlite, that's what it is. I have another chunk of howlite inside, and I purposely got it for stress management and anxiety. So another reason why I'm not supposed to move is because maybe it is going to be more anxiety. I'm also hearing from spirit because I'm just tuning into my clairaudience and using my intuition along with these charms that I need to deal with the anxiety of the reason why I do want to move. My anxiety is the reason why I want to move in the first place. The negativity and the not being able to block out the negativity is the reason why I want to move. Okay, excuse my awful drawing, but let's say we want to know the past, present, and the future of our current job. Pulling one specifically for each. So in the past, maybe we had a lot of good connections at our job. We had a lot of good colleagues, good friends at our job. But right now, there's a lot of negative energy. And in the future, we might be cycling out. We might be moving. We might be changing out into a new job because, you know what? Nothing stays the same. We're always moving forward in our life. And just like life, our job might not stay the same. One thing I thought would be cool to mention here, this deck is actually made to be like a substitute for a tarot spread. So you could even get this deck and use it to create your own spread. Because normally what you do is you pull a card and make a spread. So I'm just saying, hey, give me a spread. Ooh. And so what you would normally do is you'd pull a card for each of these. So that's like the placeholders. So instead of like past, present, future, we have navigate and karma. And then that's the answers, or sorry, that's the question. And then we would pull the answers. And so instead, what we're going to do is pull a charm for each of this. So what are we navigating right now, and what's our karma right now. We are navigating our connections, trying to put the connections together. You know, in regards to this video, we're trying to figure out how do we connect the dots between all of these messages to try to understand them. But the shadow work that needs to be done, the lessons that we need to learn, the karma that we need to break free from is maybe the old patterns, the old cycles that we need to let go of. Let's pull one clarifier here. The key is our emotions here. It's something that emotionally is holding us back. So we need to emotionally break free from these patterns to be able to kind of figure out how these connections work so that we can understand the messages through these tools. So what can we do as an action item? We can start a good habit. Okay, what's that good habit? Knock on the door. Start knocking on the door of spirit. Start actually talking to spirit. Knock on the door and say, hey, I have a question. And start asking the questions and getting the answers. Love that. So yeah, essentially, you can play around with the questions, you can play around with the location that it lands, whether it's right side up or not. Just play around with it. Start simple, then make it more complex. And now that you have that framework in mind, let's talk about how you can use your intuition with it. Because reading the charms should really come down to intuition. There's no words, there's no guidebook. I actually kind of love the idea of this because you can't go look at a guidebook. So as you're casting the runes, as you're throwing them out, you know, you could absolutely read them very literally and kind of figure out how it might relate to the question. But I would say go with your gut, even if it feels like a variation or, you know, sure, you know, your heart, you know, maybe you usually read that as love and compassion, but this time you're feeling like, oh no, I actually feel like it's more like your actual body part, like the heart, the blood, the, you know, the vessels in your heart or something. You know, be flexible with it. That's your intuition kind of talking with you. And that can be a little difficult at first, especially if you are unfamiliar with your psychic ability. That's a lot of what I teach here on my channel and in my courses. I do have like an intro psychic development course. I also have a Patreon group where we get together every month and we do a lot of practice nights and exercises together. So just know that I have those resources available to you if you want more of that practice. So much of charm casting just comes down to intuitively reading it and being flexible with the interpretations and figuring out how it fits in that overarching story. And that might take some practice and some experience. So I'm going to make you practice really quick right now. I want you to interpret what this might mean. What do you need to know about your upcoming weekend? And I'll just kind of hold these up for you just in case you can't see. Got the evil eye. We've got this kind of like door knocker hand piece. The key. And this kind of heart-shaped orangish red crystal. So let me know down in the comments how you would interpret this. And spoiler alert, there's no right or wrong answer with this, truly, because symbols mean different things to different people. But I want you to just get a feel of what it feels like to read into something intuitively. Awesome, everyone. Quick and easy approach. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions about it down below. And just remember, I have a whole playlist of all the other psychic tools that are out there and how to use them. So you can jump on over and check those out now. Feel free to give this video a like if you enjoyed it and found it helpful, and I will see you all in the next one. Alrighty, bye.